Remarks. It is my great pleasure to introduce our next speaker. That is Lanae Erickson. Many of you know Lanae. She's the Senior Vice President for Social Policy and Politics at Third Way. She's a great friend of New Deal. We are super excited and thrilled that Third Way, can I say waited? I don't know. Waited or rushed or something to get their polling done so that they could share their findings about the election first with New Deal leaders. And so we're so grateful. Lanae is a wonderful communicator. The thing I love most about your bio is that she loves to work on the hardest and most divisive issues. I kind of feel like that's exactly what we need right now. So Lanae's here to share the results of their new poll.
Let's start here. Raise your hand if you have run for and won elected office. Yeah, great. Raise your hand if you felt like having a D next to your name and the Democratic brand helped you win that office. All right, that's more than I thought, honestly, so we've got some place to start. If you look around, though, you can see that there's a problem, and it's not one that happened in the last couple of weeks. It's been growing for a long time. And I think it's one that we really need to address squarely if we are going to be able to wrest our government back from the MAGA forces that have now taken it over. So when I agreed to do this talk and share this poll with you, I hoped and honestly I believed that we were going to be in a different place. I was very hopeful until I wasn't. And so before we dig into the data, I just want to take a moment to talk about the vice president. She was dealt a hand, and in my view, she played it almost perfectly. In the last 100 days, the decisions that she made, she outgrew everyone's expectations. And so in our discussion about where we go from here, there's going to be a lot of circular firing squads. There's going to be a lot of people with takes about Vice President Harris. My take is she did everything she could. But the problem was she was running with a series of anvils tied to her back. She was running with Biden baggage, with the weight of a Democratic brand that in many places is not serving us, with race and gender and all kinds of other things, and with some positions that she took in 2019 that came back to haunt her. She decided to take them under pressure from the far left in a Democratic primary, and then she had to speak for them later. So it is incumbent on us now to take a deep look at what happened and map our path forward from here. So in order to do that, we're going to talk about our post-election poll. It's not out yet. We're releasing it to the public tomorrow, but we wanted to share it with you all first because we think you are a big piece of this solution. So we did a post-election poll. Again, was hoping this would be in different circumstances, but here we are now with some data to figure out where we go from here. We worked with a firm Global Strategy Group. We talked to voters in all of the swing presidential states, 1,600 voters from November 7th through 11th, and we oversampled Latino voters because we were very aware, as we all were, that that was going to be a big piece of the conversation. So let's begin with the issues. When you asked voters who they trusted on a whole variety of issues, across the board, they said they trusted Donald Trump to handle issues more than Kamala Harris. This is shocking if you look at this list. There are only two things, if you look at the margin, that are in the blue: climate change and abortion. That's it. On all of these issues that people kept saying were their top priority in this election, whether it's the economy, where Trump was ahead by about 10 points, or border security, where he had a walloping 21-point lead, we just couldn't measure up. And even on something like protecting democracy, it was a wash. That's not the recipe for a winning coalition. You can look, I could stop right now. I could just leave, right? You look at this slide. How, with this backdrop, could you possibly win an election? Now, I've said before and I'll say again, voters agree with Democrats on lots and lots of things that they don't care very much about. And I think that we really have to grapple with that. We have to understand that not only is this chart harrowing, it is almost exactly mirroring the issue priority order that voters said was important to them. The things at the top on which Trump had the biggest edge are the things that people cared most about. Now, you might be thinking, people care about abortion, and they do. And that is absolutely clear. But voters are smart. And they didn't believe that this election would necessarily directly impact access to abortion. We saw in 2022 where abortion access was proximate to candidate choice, where you said, am I gonna get Gretchen Whitmer and abortion access or a crazy person and not? People made that choice. But they just didn't buy that Trump was going to do a national abortion ban. And frankly, on our side, they didn't buy that we could deliver restoring Roe. And that's something that we're going to have to grapple with moving forward. We saw some hints of this in the midterms that should have been a sign when you look at the outcomes in blue states, places like New York, Oregon, California. We didn't have the midterms that we did in some of those swing states because people didn't believe that Lee Zeldin in New York was going to outlaw abortion, because he wasn't. So we're going to have to really grapple with how we talk about this crucial issue that is life and death in a way that is real about what we can deliver and what we can't. So voters obviously are frustrated with the status quo. The electorate's in a pissy mood, and they are trusting Trump on all of their major priorities, particularly immigration and crime and the economy. And we know that if most of the country thinks we're going in the wrong direction, the person who's going to win is the change agent. And the vice president really tried to land that. She tried to be the change agent, but what we found was it didn't work. We asked people, is Kamala offering more of the same or change? 60% of voters in battleground states said more of the same. With persuadable voters, that number was 73%. Only a quarter of swing voters thought that Harris was offering change. And if you add this all up, we asked people, why did you choose who you chose for the top of the ticket? 80% of people who voted for Trump said they did it because of his policies. Makes sense. That's what they said they trusted him on. We're going to have to grapple with that. The decision on Harris was much more mixed. About 40% said, I think it's the policies. Another chunk said it's her character. Another chunk said, I just hate Trump. Another chunk said, I don't want Republicans in charge. It's just a much more complex picture. But Trump voters wanted what he says he's going to do on the issues. So the next piece we looked at was ideology. And this won't surprise you all, you see it every single day, but we live in a center-right country. The plurality of voters say that they're moderates, but then when you look at who's left, there's twice as many conservatives as liberals. And this is true even in blue states, blue districts. There just isn't as big of a base on the left that there is on the right. It's the fundamental asymmetry that we have to grapple with. And that means Republicans can win largely by delivering their base and adding a little bit of swing to it. And that doesn't work for us. We have to win a supermajority of moderate voters if we're going to be able to get over the hump. And you'll see that in some of these key groups, they're even more moderate. Latinos, more moderate than the general population. Persuadable voters, 67% called themselves moderates. I think 5% called themselves liberals. There weren't a bunch of left-wing people sitting at home waiting for us to go after them. They all showed up. And on that note about who showed up, you'll see white college-educated voters do trend a little bit more liberal than the general population, and we know we did better with them. That's awesome. Welcome. Cool. But I was at a great welcome pack convening with our friends last week, and someone mentioned that in this election, 96% of white college-educated voters turned out. Folks, we have squeezed all the juice we can out of that. There is not a lot more to gain, and we absolutely have to add to that and appeal to a broader group if we're going to win. So looking a little bit more deeply at ideology, because who knows what those terms mean, we often ask this question and asked it again in our post-election poll. If there's a scale, 0 means completely left, 10 means completely conservative, where do you put yourself and where do you put the candidates? And here we saw folks put Trump and Harris pretty much equidistant from the center. So 5 is dead set center. They put Harris at 2.5. They put Trump at 7.8. That's about the same distance from the midpoint. But they put themselves at a 5.6. And what that means is they are a full point closer to Trump than they are to Harris. A point might not seem like that much, but if you look at the distance on there, it's like a Richter scale. When we see, we've asked this over decades now, when we see those dots moving closer together, that's who's going to win. It happens every single time. And so we need to figure out how to move our dot closer to where voters think they are. Now, I'm sure many of you, me, other people spend countless dollars and minutes trying to persuade people that Republicans were extreme, because they are. Did the voters believe us? The answer is no. When we asked which party was more extreme, look at that number. It's within the margin of error, but they actually said Democrats are more extreme than Republicans. It's pretty much a statistical tie, but it's a statistical tie with this Republican Party. That can't be how we move forward. And if you add together the folks who said Democrats are more extreme and the 12% that said they're equally extreme, that's 56% of the electorate that says our party is extreme. If you look at the lower charts on there, it's even more depressing. You'll see about 3/4 of persuadable voters said that the Democratic Party was too extreme. Now, before I move to the next slide, I'm going to give you a little bit of a trigger warning. This is the place in the poll that I literally had to put it down and walk away. So close your eyes if you can't take it. We asked in open ends, what's a word that describes these two folks at the top of the ticket? Sure, people said Harris was qualified, smart, intelligent, but the biggest word in the middle there is liberal. Remember that only 21% of these folks called themselves that, and that's the number one word that they used for her. On the other side, you see strong leader. Now, this is the point at which I have to say there is some race and gender stuff in here that I do not fully understand how to get beyond. So we can acknowledge that. But also, our party brand was an anvil. We have to make sure that our future nominees are not contending with out-of-step policies that they took a position 4 years ago to satisfy the far left, and that they are not contending with a view that they are extreme and liberal. These word clouds get even more depressing but clearer if you look at key groups, low propensity voters, ticket splitters, persuadables, late deciders. You can see on the bottom, they didn't like Trump, but they did not think that we were a viable alternative. And finally, I've listened to a lot of podcasts over the past 2 weeks. But one that I decided not to listen to was Bernie Sanders on the Daily, because I knew what he was going to say. He said, and has been saying everywhere, that the problem was we were appealing to the middle, the problem was Liz Cheney, the problem was that we weren't far enough left. Now, I don't know how you could say that with the data we've seen so far, but we wanted to test it. And so during the summer, Third Way wrote a memo that we shared with a lot of allies. We called it the red light, green light memo. And on all of the toughest issues, we said, here's a way to handle it that appeals to a broad electorate: order at the border, safety in our communities, and holding violent criminals accountable, opportunity to earn a good life, hard work, these kinds of messages that actually Harris embraced for her 100 days. Those are the green light messages. And then we tested typical Democrat lefty stuff that we called the red light messages. And we're like, don't say that. Say this instead. Do not say open borders. Say order at the border. And what we saw was that in every single instance, those green light messages, those moderate mainstream messages, outtested the left messages by 20 points. And you know who liked them? Democrats. Democrats liked them. Latinos liked them. Everybody liked them. So there was just significantly more support for these kind of policies and positions and messaging that Harris embraced in the last part of this general election. The problem was the anvils. The problem was she's still contending with a party brand. She's still contending with 2019 positions that voters really they weren't sure which one was the real her. So where do we go from here? We have to wrest our government back from the MAGA forces that now control it. The only vehicle for that, I believe, is the Democratic Party. Sometimes I wish there was another one, but there isn't. This is the car we've got. We got to make it work. So we have to shift our brand toward the center and be able to win in the midterms so we can put a check on Trump in the House and win in 2028. And that's going to require some hard conversations. We absolutely cannot have a repeat of the 2019 Democratic primary, where people are raising their hands for substantively bad and politically poisonous ideas. That means we're going to have some hard conversations with folks in our lives to make sure that's not the case. But if I look across this room, we know how to do this. You do this every day. So I truly believe that if we are going to save America, guys, we're the ones we've been waiting for. It's going to come from this room and this movement, and we've got to put our heads down and do that work. Thank you. We've got time for a couple of questions. Yep. Go ahead. It's got a microphone behind me.
Yeah. Thank you. Hi, I'm Megan Lukens, Colorado State Representative. You were giving examples of green light messages. You said order at the border, and I was just wondering if you could give a few more specific examples of green light messages.
Sure, and we're putting the poll out tomorrow. It is all in there, and I can also send you my red light, green light memo because it's one of the most fun things we wrote during this campaign, frankly. But on crime, what we found was really leading into safety and accountability was super important. So we talk about it as accountability and prevention. And the prevention piece people already know about Democrats. The accountability piece they question. Are we willing to hold people accountable if they hurt other people in our communities? Yes, we are. And also, we want to prevent crime moving forward. So that one has tested really well across all the research we've done. On issues around transgender young people, we have done 15 rounds of research on this, and it's something we care about a lot. There is a way to talk about it, and it's about parents and families. It is about parents and families and doctors being able to make the right decision for their children. That is what we're facing. And that's going to come up a lot more because we have now seen multiple people put forward for big positions that deny the existence of transgender people. We cannot be the party that goes back on that. But we have to grapple with the fact that Americans aren't with us on a lot of these issues, and we need to persuade them. And order at the border was my favorite throughout the cycle because I kept saying it and then I kept hearing other people say it, and I was like, yes, not border security, order, because people don't like chaos. They want order. And you know what? Migrants want order. Immigrants want order. Everyone wants order. We need the system to work. And so it's not about militarization. It's about creating a process that can actually work and do it in an effective way. On the economy, it's all about hard work and opportunity. My favorite international stat is that if you ask people across the developed world on a scale of 1 to 10, how important is hard work to getting ahead? In France, 40% of people say it's a 9 or a 10. In the United States, 90% of people say it's a 9 or a 10. We love hard work, we believe in it, and we think that we can make our own destiny. So those are a couple examples.
Thank you. So I want to talk a little bit more specifically about economics, because in watching how the electorate flips back and forth frequently, and that we have probably a majority that are low information voters that are really just, it's easy to penetrate, milk is expensive, right? And I've been thinking a lot about the fact that we do see in our global economy, income gains go to the top. Generally, there's just a whole bunch of people that feel left behind and pissed off, and that the government works to benefit people not like that.
Yep.
And then when they're low information and they check in for an election, they're like, I'm mad, this isn't what I want. But I've been wondering if no party could really get a real advantage unless you can grapple with the fact that our economy does not work for the majority of people in the country. And I will say I listened to Bernie on the daily, and that was his main point.
Yeah.
And I don't think he's wrong, but I don't know. It's hard. It's not anything that's easy to fix. But I just don't know that there is a path to really getting them on message with Democrats unless we really are. Our economy, just the way it's structured, is a bit of a problem there.
Yeah.
I want your thoughts.
Absolutely, and we did a lot of economic research earlier in the cycle, and one of the things that we found was that voters now give Republicans an advantage on being the party of working people. I don't believe that we can move forward and win across the board unless we change that. So absolutely true, and on that I do agree with Bernie Sanders, although not on much else. But I think one of the problems that we've seen across the board is that people believe that Democrats don't really care about the economy, that we don't really care if businesses succeed in this country. And we asked a question that I didn't even put in the public release, but about what was the driver of inflation. Was it price gouging by companies, or was it overspending by the government? And the latter one, hands down. So whether or not that's true, I don't believe that some version of left-wing populism where we just bash corporations is the way forward, because people already believe we don't really like business. So we're just reinforcing a thing they already worry about with us. I think that the vice president was absolutely right to talk about capitalism and to talk about how to make it work, and in particular, how to make it work for people without a college degree. We have about a third of the country with a college degree. They're doing okay. The rest are not. And we have to be the party that looks like we care about that and have answers for that other than you should all go to college. So we've started down that path. I think there's a lot more to do, and I'm sure at the state and local level, there's a lot that you all are doing that could speak to that. I've got one over here.
Hi, Mayor Tashara Jones from St. Louis, Missouri. I think that at some point we have to say the quiet part out loud, and I'm hopeful that you've done research on the how race and sexism really played a role in this election. We thought that our country was ready to elect Hillary Clinton, who also did just about everything right during her campaign. Same thing with Harris, even though I agree she was carrying a whole host of weights on her shoulders and having to do all of this in 100 days. But I think that we're doing ourselves a serious disservice if we don't grapple with the role that race and sexism had in not only this race, but in this party and in this country.
Yeah. Absolutely, and in the public release of the poll tomorrow, you'll see a piece of it that I didn't include here because I wanted to talk about action that we could take in the near term, and this is obviously a much longer term problem. What we saw, we did an academic set of questions that are used to aggregate to a racial resentment and sexism resentment scale. They're tested in academia, and it doesn't ask you directly, it just asks a bunch of related questions and then creates a metric. What we found was that racial resentment played about identical a role in this election as it did in 2020. There was a big association between racial resentment and voting for Donald Trump, but it was exactly the same this time as it was last time. It wasn't more because of Harris. That doesn't mean we don't have to grapple with it, but it's really about Democrats and about what Trump is selling, not just about this nominee. On the sexism piece, it was slightly different. With the overall electorate, it was correlated the same as 2020. With late deciders, the sexism piece was much more correlated with going towards Trump. So that's something we're going to have to figure out too. And I know, I woke up the next day saying, are we ever going to have a female president in my lifetime? And I've spent a lot of time thinking about that. And I think that that's always going to be an anvil. But if we don't have 7 others, we could have gotten over the finish line here. And I really think, we were close enough that we could have outrun it if we were able to solve some of these other problems. I think I have time for one more question.
I'm Christine Reeves, state representative from Washington. As many of you probably know, the only state that shifted farther left this election cycle. But my question is actually rooted in actually that challenge, that I'm a pro-business Democrat in a suburban swing district in South King County, and find that being a pro-business Democrat in the Democratic Party right now, particularly in Washington, is incredibly difficult. And I think as I've watched over this last election cycle, the key takeaway I feel like I heard, but maybe didn't see reflected, or it may be reflected in the full poll, is that for a lot of Democrats in particular, but I think the public in general, this election was about character and about morality. And I'm curious whether or not there's any data reflected in your poll on how voters perceive the Democratic Party as the party of morals and character and justice relative to the Republicans, who obviously ran an entire campaign on morals and character and justice. And I'm just curious if you can speak to that.
As I was preparing for this, I was taking a look at the question about why did you vote for the top of the ticket, and I noticed that there were 10% in Trump's camp that said they voted because of his character. And I was like, who is that? I don't understand. Those people we're not getting back, whoever that is. But I think it's a great question. I think, we didn't test morals and values particularly in this poll. But in the research that I've seen over the past couple of years, one of the things that we see is that people do agree with a lot of the values of the Democratic Party, but they might have some disagreements on some, and they worry they're not allowed to say that out loud. And so one of the things that some really great partners that we work with often at Wide Angle Research did was say, if you see a Democrat at a party, you're hanging out at a Christmas party, what does the Democrat look like? What do they say? And they were like, they're telling me I can't make that joke. I'm not allowed to say that. They're boring, and they're not the person I'm trying to talk to. And then you're like, what is the Republican? They're like, oh, they're fun. So absolutely, especially in this time, we're going to have to hold on to our morals, but we're going to have to do it in a way that creates space for people to have differing opinions and figure out that balance. And I think hold fast to the values that we have, that transgender people exist, and transgender young people are going to be in the crosshairs, and we absolutely have to stand up and defend them, and also make space for people to have questions about the rules participating in sports and things like that. We can do both of those things, I think, but that's the challenge ahead of us. Thank you all so much, and I will turn it over to Jonathan.